Imagine plunging into a world so alien, so hostile, that every shadow in the water could mean your end. There are no safe shores, no calm blue seas, only endless black depths, shifting silhouettes, and the constant sensation that something is watching you. This isn't a scene from a science fiction movie. This was Earth, hundreds of millions of years ago, and beneath those ancient waves lurked creatures so bizarre and fearsome. They make today's sharks look like harmless goldfish. Tonight, we're diving deep into that forgotten ocean where predators didn't just hunt, they dominated. But as we descend into the past, I have to warn you, the deeper we go, the stranger and far more dangerous it gets. So stay close and don't lose sight of the surface. You might not find it again. The ocean that stretched across the planet in the Devonian period was a place of constant motion. Warm shallows along volcanic coasts, white continental shelves rich with reefs, and beyond that, a dark abyss where sunlight never reached. This was the age of fishes, and life here was exploding in size and diversity. Armored placoderms, prehistoric fish with bony plates instead of scales, glided through the waters. Among them was Dunkelsteus, a predator over 30 feet long, with jaws so powerful it could bite through armor and bone like paper. It had no true teeth, just sharp, interlocking bone plates that slammed shut with enough force to crush a modern-day car door. Imagine swimming in those waters, feeling the water pressure change as something massive passed behind you, and knowing you'd never even see the attack coming. But Dunkelsteus wasn't alone. Beneath it swam shadows from even earlier ages, ancient sharks that would never be mistaken for the sleek hunters of today. Lake, for example, was faster and more agile than almost anything else in the water. It had a slender, torpedo-shaped body and could dart forward in sudden bursts, slicing through schools of armored fish before they had a chance to scatter. It didn't rely on brute force like Dunkelsteus. It was a relentless chaser, and when it locked onto prey, there was no escape. And then there were the creatures of the deep, the trilobites, segmented. Alien-looking arthropods crawled and scuttled along the ocean floor, their compound eyes scanning for danger. Some were small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. Others grew to the size of dinner plates, and in deeper waters, even larger species lurked. They were survivors, having thrived for hundreds of millions of years, but even they had predators. Sea scorpions, eurypterids, prowled the seabed, their spiny legs stirring up clouds of sound as they hunted. Some reached over 8 feet in length, with pincers strong enough to slice through the hard shells of trilobites and early fish. In the murky dim light of the seafloor, they would suddenly lunge forward, grabbing anything that wandered too close. The reefs themselves were nothing like the ones we know today. Instead of colorful coral teeming with tropical fish, these ancient reefs were made of sponges and strange calcareous organisms, and they were crawling with predators. Giant orthocones, squid-like cephalopods encased in long, conical shells, hovered silently, their tentacles poised to strike. They were the stealth hunters of their time, drifting almost motionless until prey wandered too near, then pulling it in with lightning speed. Some orthocones reached lengths of more than 30 feet, their shells like ghostly towers in the water. Everywhere you looked, survival was a gamble. Small fish darted between the shadows of the reef, each movement calculated, each second a decision between hunger and safety. Above, schools of armored fish swirled together, trying to confuse predators. Below, in the silt and darkness, unseen hunters waited with infinite patience. It was a world of strategies, speed, armor, stealth, brute force, and those that failed didn't survive long enough to leave a trace in the fossil record. And yet, as terrifying as these seas were, they were beautiful. Imagine the sunlight filtering down in shifting beams, illuminating clouds of tiny plankton drifting like dust in the water. A shoal of fish, their bodies flashing silver in the light, would sweep past in perfect synchronization, only to explode apart as a shadow moved among them. The dance between life and death played out endlessly here, with no mercy and no pause. But the deeper you went, the stranger the life became. Down where light couldn't reach, creatures adapted to darkness in eerie ways. Some had no eyes at all, relying on vibrations to sense movement. Others had oversized, reflective eyes that caught even the faintest hint of bioluminescence, a flicker of blue or green in the endless black. And some were the source of that glow, using light as bait to lure victims close enough to strike. These lights weren't friendly beacons. They were traps. The most unsettling thing about these ancient oceans wasn't just the predators, or the alien shapes of the creatures. It was the feeling that you didn't belong there, that every move you made marked you as prey in a world that had no sympathy for the slow, the curious, or the unprepared. Even today, when we look at the fossils pulled from ancient seabeds, there's a certain unease. The bony plates, the serrated jaws, the endless adaptations for hunting, they tell a story of a world far older than ours and far less forgiving. And yet, all of it vanished. Entire species, entire ecosystems swept away by mass extinctions, climate shifts, and the slow, relentless march of time. The oceans of today are pale imitations of the ones that came before. The monsters are gone, but sometimes late at night when a diver feels that sudden chill, that shiver, that says something is watching from the dark. Maybe it's just the memory of those ancient hunters lingering in the depths. The ancient oceans did not rest, even as the great predators of the Devonian prowled the reefs and shallows. Other seas in Earth's history bred entirely different nightmares. Travel forward tens of millions of years, and you'd find yourself in the late Triassic, when the oceans teemed with strange reptiles that had returned to the water after millions of years on land. These were not fish, nor were they dinosaurs. They were something altogether different. Sleek, paddle-limbed hunters like the Nothosaurus glided beneath the surface, their long necks weaving through schools of fish. They hunted with surgical precision, striking in swift bursts, then disappearing into the blue without a trace. In those moments of stillness, you could almost believe the ocean was empty, until the water around you moved, and you realized it was the predator itself circling back in the open water. Ichthyosaurs ruled. Imagine a reptile shaped like a modern dolphin but stretched longer, heavier, and armed with jaws lined in sharp, cone-shaped teeth. Some species were small, agile hunters, while others, like Shonosaurus, grew to over 50 feet. Massive enough to swallow prey whole, they didn't just rule the waves through size. They were built for speed, capable of bursts that could outpace nearly anything else in their domain. For smaller creatures, the worst part wasn't even the attack itself. It was the eerie moment when a shadow passed just below, silent and fast, before the surface erupted in foam and blood. Closer to the coast, in murky bays and estuaries, predators relied less on speed and more on ambush. Placodonts, armored reptiles with crushing teeth, lurked among rocky shallows, waiting for hard-shelled prey. Their broad, flattened bodies made them look harmless at first glance, like part of the seafloor itself, but the moment a shellfish or ammonite drifted near, the placodonts' jaws snapped shut with devastating force. The shells of their victims shattered in an instant, fragments scattering in the current. In these waters, the ammonites themselves were everywhere, spiral-shelled relatives of squid and octopuses drifting in graceful schools. They were beautiful, patterned in intricate ridges and chambers, but beauty was no shield against the predators of the age. Giant ichthyosaurs could tear through their ranks with little effort, sending pieces of broken shell tumbling into the depths. And yet, the ammonites endured, adapting to changes in the seas for over 300 million years before finally vanishing at the end of the Cretaceous. Farther offshore, the ocean seemed calmer, but this was an illusion. Beneath the gentle rolling swells, predators hunted in silence. The earliest plesiosaurs appeared during this time, their strange bodies a blend of elegance and menace, long necks ending in small, sharp-toothed heads, broad flippers that cut through the water with eerie smoothness. They seemed almost slow, drifting lazily just beneath the surface, but when they struck, it was with blinding speed, their necks snapping forward to seize fish or squid before the prey even realized it was in danger. And in the deeper zones, stranger forms lurked. The fish of these depths were often slow-moving, conserving energy in the dim light, but their shapes could unsettle even the bravest observer. Some had elongated, eel-like bodies that undulated through the darkness. Others had jaws that could open far wider than seemed possible, allowing them to swallow prey nearly their own size. Without sunlight, colors faded to pale shades or vanished entirely, replaced by translucent skin that revealed the slow pulse of internal organs. And in the blackest depths, some creatures generated their own light, small, pulsing beacons to lure the curious close enough to be consumed. The ocean's surface might have seemed a safer place, but here, too, death could strike without warning. Storms could rise suddenly, tossing waves like mountains and dragging the unwary far from shore. In those turbulent waters, the visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the roar of the sea masked the approach of predators a plesiosaur could rise silently from. Beneath the chaos, jaws breaking the surface in a spray of water and blood before vanishing again. Even the reef zones, often teeming with life, were perilous. Here, sharp-toothed fish wove between coral-like structures, chasing prey into narrow channels where escape was impossible. Small marine reptiles patrolled the edges, slipping into crevices and dragging their victims out by force. Every inch of the reef was alive with movement, from the smallest crustaceans picking over scraps to the largest hunters sweeping in for the kill. The reef was a feast, but one you might never leave once you entered. In this world, survival required constant awareness. Every shadow could hide a hunter. Every patch of open water could be the hunting ground of something faster, stronger, and hungrier than you. The ocean was not a passive force. It was a living, breathing battlefield, and everything within it, from the smallest fish to the largest reptile, was both predator and prey. Those who survived did so by perfecting their defenses, honing their senses, and moving with calculated precision. One mistake, one wrong turn, and you vanished into the endless blue, never to be seen again. Even now, the fossils pulled from these ancient seabeds carry a certain tension. The bite marks in ammonite shells, the broken vertebrae of reptiles, the fossilized remains of entire schools of fish caught mid-flight, they all speak of a world where the ocean was never still, and where the line between life and death was as thin as a ripple in the water. These were the seas that shaped the course of evolution, seas where only the most adaptable could endure. And though the creatures themselves are gone, their echoes remain, hidden in stone, waiting for the moment when we dare to look back into the darkness and remember what once ruled there. Move ahead in time again, and the oceans grow even more dangerous. By the Jurassic period, the seas had become hunting grounds for creatures so specialized, so perfectly adapted, that they seemed engineered for dominance. The warm, shallow waters near the coasts were alive with color and movement, but beneath that beauty was a constant, invisible tension. At any moment, the water could erupt in violence. Here, massive marine reptiles like the pliosaurs patrolled the deep channels, short-necked. Powerfully built predators with heads longer than a man was tall. Their jaws were armed with teeth like polished spears, capable of tearing through flesh in a single bite. When a pliosaur struck, it did not hesitate. It did not circle. It lunged forward with devastating force, leaving nothing but a swirl of red in the water. In these same seas swam other giants. Plesiosaurs still roamed, their long necks weaving among schools of fish. But now they shared the water with ichthyosaurs at their peak. Ophthalmosaurus, a sleek ichthyosaur with massive eyes, could dive deep into the darkness to hunt squid and other deep-water prey. Those enormous eyes reflected the faintest glimmer of light, allowing it to navigate where others would be blind. Imagine being a small fish drifting in the gloom, seeing those twin orbs of silver appear from the blackness. By the time you realized they were eyes, it would already be too late. The Jurassic seas were also filled with armored prey. Ammonites grew to enormous sizes, some with shells as wide as a human is tall. They drifted in spirals through the water, propelled by rhythmic pulses from their tentacles. Their shells were their only defense, but even that could be shattered by the crushing jaws of a pliosaur or the sharp beak of a giant. Squid. And giant squid there were, not the kind we know today, but prehistoric relatives that reached lengths that would dwarf even the largest predators of the modern ocean. Their long arms could coil around a victim and pull it into a beak designed to slice through bone. Closer to the shore, fish of every shape and size swarmed the reefs and kelp forests. Some were covered in tough scales that acted like armor. Others had evolved speed that rivaled the fastest predators. But speed was not always enough. Ambush hunters like the crocodile-like meteorhinchids hid in the shadows. their streamlined bodies and flippers allowing them to dart forward in sudden bursts. They hunted with a combination of stealth and ferocity, dragging prey down before it could even cry out in distress. Farther offshore, the open ocean was deceptively empty. Long stretches of water held little visible life, but here the true giants roamed. Leadsithes, a massive filter-feeding fish, glided slowly through these waters, its mouth open wide to capture plankton. It was harmless to creatures too large to swallow, yet its sheer size, up to 50 feet, made it a moving island in the sea, and where there were giants, predators followed. Pliosaurs and large sharks would stalk the slower-moving creatures, ready to strike at any weakness. The night in the Jurassic oceans was a different world entirely. As the sun sank, the surface grew still, but in the depths, bioluminescent life began to glow. Tiny plankton shimmered like drifting stars, while larger predators displayed eerie, pulsing lights to lure in victims. In the blackness, those lights were the only points of reference, and they were often deadly. Some fish dangled, glowing lures from their heads, swaying them like bait. Others lit their sides in sudden flashes to confuse attackers or to communicate with their own kind. In the endless dark, in the shallows, nocturnal hunters emerged, small. Quick predators hunted crabs and shellfish along the seafloor, darting between patches of seaweed. Rays and early relatives of modern rays glided silently over the sand, their flat bodies nearly invisible until they struck. Above, shadows moved, perhaps a small plesiosaur cruising slowly through the moonlit water, its head turning in smooth arcs as it searched for movement. The stillness was deceptive. A sudden strike could come from anywhere. What made the Jurassic seas truly terrifying was the variety of hunting strategies. They were creatures that relied purely on speed, capable of chasing down almost anything. Others were masters of stealth, waiting motionless until the perfect moment to attack. Some had armor so thick that only the largest predators could penetrate it, and some depended on sheer size, able to overpower smaller creatures simply by force. The balance of life was delicate, but unforgiving. Any weakness meant death. Fossils from this time show clear evidence of these. Constant battles, shells with bite marks, bones scarred by healed injuries. Even entire skeletons of predators found with the remains of their last meal still inside. They are frozen moments from a world where life was a constant gamble and the odds were rarely in your favor. To survive in the Jurassic oceans was to be in motion, always alert, always ready to flee or fight. The calmest waters could hide the deadliest hunters, and the most beautiful reefs could become killing grounds in an instant. These seas were ancient arenas, shaped by millions of years of evolution. Every creature was the product of survival, refined and perfected through endless generations. And though their forms are now locked in stone, the story they tell is still vivid. That once, long before humans, Earth's oceans were ruled by beings so strange and powerful that even imagining them feels like stepping into a nightmare that was once real and stretched from horizon to horizon beneath the waves. The final chapter of these ancient seas takes us to the late Cretaceous, a time when the oceans reached their peak in both diversity and danger. The continents were not yet in the positions we know today, and vast inland seas split the landmasses, creating enormous stretches of warm, shallow water teeming with life. These were not just coasts, they were entire worlds beneath the waves. And at the top of the food chain here was a predator unlike any other, the mosasaur. Mosasaurus and its relatives were colossal marine reptiles, some exceeding 50 feet in length, with muscular bodies and tails that could propel them at terrifying speed. Their heads were massive, their jaws lined with teeth that curved slightly inward, ensuring that anything caught between them could not escape. They didn't just bite, they tore, shaking their prey violently to rip away huge chunks of flesh. If you were a fish, a turtle, or even another marine reptile, a mosasaur's approach meant the end was seconds away. Fossils have even been found with the bones of other mosasaurs inside their stomachs, proving they were not above turning on their own kind. Sharing the seas with these monsters were other deadly hunters. Large sharks, some reaching lengths of 20 feet or more, patrolled the open waters. They were fast, opportunistic, and armed with rows of serrated teeth perfect for slicing through flesh. In the shallows, massive turtles swam, some peaceful, grazing on vegetation, others predatory, capable of snapping through bone. Fish schools moved in vast, glittering clouds, trying to overwhelm the senses of their pursuers, but predators had evolved to read the chaos, picking off individuals with practiced ease. Beneath the surface, the world was alive with motion. Plesiosaurs still glided through the waters, their long necks weaving between shoals of fish, while smaller marine reptiles darted through reefs in search of squid. Ammonites continued to spiral through the seas, though their days were numbered. Their shells shone in the sunlight filtering from above, but their beauty could not shield them from predators. The mosasaurs would crush them easily, leaving broken fragments drifting down to the sea floor. The inland seas of the Cretaceous were different from the deep oceans in another way. Their shallower depths meant sunlight reached much farther, creating vast fields of underwater plants. These meadows supported countless smaller creatures from crustaceans to fish, which in turn attracted predators, and yet this abundance also brought danger. In these tight, plant-filled spaces, ambush hunters thrived. Crocodile-like reptiles lurked motionless, their patterned skin blending perfectly into the surroundings, waiting for the exact moment to strike. Farther out, the deep waters held creatures adapted to a colder, darker realm. The fish here were leaner, built for long migrations, and some of the squid-like animals grew to tremendous sizes. Hunting in these depths required patience. Predators would follow prey for hours, even days, waiting for a sign of weakness and injury, fatigue, or the brief mistake of leaving the safety of a group. In the darkness, such a mistake could be fatal. Storms over the Cretaceous seas were sudden and violent. Waves could rise higher than the length of a plesiosaur, and currents twisted through the shallows with deadly force. Creatures caught in these storms were often driven toward shorelines where predators waited to take advantage of the chaos. For the hunters, such moments were feasts. For the hunted, they were massacres. Even the largest creatures could be overwhelmed in the frenzy, disappearing beneath the foam without a trace. Night in these waters carried its own hazards. Without sunlight, vision was limited, and the only illumination came from flashes of bioluminescence. Tiny creatures glowed as they moved, tracing faint lines of light through the water. Larger hunters sometimes used these signals to home in on prey, following the faint trails until they reached their target. Others produced light themselves, luring smaller creatures close before striking in total silence. In the dark, every shadow seemed closer than it was, and every movement carried the weight of danger. The late Cretaceous oceans were in constant motion, their ecosystems tightly balanced. For millions of years, the cycle of predator and prey continued, shaping creatures into the perfect weapons of survival. But then, in an instant on the geological time scale, it all ended. A mass extinction event swept through the planet, wiping out nearly all the marine reptiles, most of the ammonites, and countless other species. The seas that had been ruled by giants became empty. In comparison, their rulers gone forever. Yet the story of these oceans remains written in stone. Fossils of mosasaurs with their final meals still preserved inside. Ammonite shells showing the scars of attacks, and bones with the telltale punctures of ancient teeth. All of them are silent witnesses to a world that once existed beneath the waves. They remind us that Earth has been through ages of unimaginable life, of beauty, and terror intertwined, and that the monsters of our nightmares were, for millions of years, very real. When we look out at the calm oceans today, it's easy to forget the world they once hid. But if you could peel back time and step into those ancient waters, you would find yourself surrounded by predators the likes of which will never be seen again. And in that moment, you'd understand that the modern ocean, for all its dangers, is a far gentler place than the ones that came before. The ancient seas were not just home to creatures straight out of nightmares, they were the nightmares themselves, living, breathing, and hunting in the endless blue.